You want to know what happened there, on the hill, so listen. As everyone knows, over 100,000 warriors stood on the field during the Second Battle of Sodden Hill, and of those at least 30,000 were maimed or killed. There was a din and flames. There were flaming arrows and exploding balls of fire. There were screams and crashes, and I suddenly found myself on the ground, and I thought the blood in which I was lying was Coral's blood, but it was my own. And then I saw what they had done to me, and I started to howl.
Hello. If this video seems to have arrived apropos of absolutely nothing, I apologize. Thus far, while franchises like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings have been subject to frequent analysis on YouTube, video rants on the TV series The Witcher are somewhat more thin on the ground. I get it, it's a new show and thus far has only really had one major war scene, and that's fine. But ever since I finished watching the season finale, titled simply Much More, I've had a problem where everyone keeps comparing the Battle of Sodden Hill to the Battle of Helm's Deep from The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. I will freely admit that I am biased here. The Two Towers is my third favorite movie in the world, following closely behind the two films that came immediately before and after it. Video essayists much smarter than myself, such as The Nerd Writer, have explained why better than I ever could, but in short, everything from the cinematography and the choreography to the score and the sound design put Helm's Deep a cut above its kind. Even if the charge at the Pelennor Fields holds first place in my heart, the fight at the Hornburg was a masterclass with a clear rise of tension, a formidable sense of scale, high stakes, comprehensible defensive versus offensive strategy, and cleanly drawn battle lines.
So it begins.
And you could successfully argue that it's not fair to compare Sodden Hill to one of the best movie battles of all time from a series that won over a dozen Academy Awards. But the comparison was made and my blood pressure was raised, and here we are. Analyzing the strategy and tactics behind the Battle of Sodden Hill until I get deep enough into this bottle of wine that it becomes a full-blown rant. Disclaimer. If you loved The Witcher, that's fine. I mostly enjoyed it myself, but if you loved the Battle of Sodden Hill, you're probably not going to enjoy this very much, so fair warning. Additionally, I'm not a historian or a military tactician. I'm just a girl who grew up weirdly obsessed with Arians, the campaigns of Alexander, and has been in quarantine for some unknown number of weeks now, so yeah, this is happening. If you're interested in learning more about real ancient battle tactics for fun or profit, there are plenty of fantastic YouTube channels that offer mini expert docs on the subject, including, but not limited to, Historia Civilis, Invicta, whose Improved Battle Plans series offers improvements to fictional on-screen battle strategies, Kings and Generals, Baz Battles, and Schola Gladiatoria, who also does great reviews of on-screen weapons and fight scenes. So before we start, let's orient ourselves. Yennefer is one of several mages sent by the Brotherhood of Sorcerers to defend an abandoned stronghold in the Kingdom of Sodden from the sorceress Frangilla and the invading Nilfgaardian army. Nilfgaard invades from the south. The abandoned castle keep at Sodden Hill, the site of the mage's defense, lies on the south side of the Yaruka River ravine and is connected to the north by a thin stone bridge. Sodden Hill is the only way to reach the northern kingdoms, which are as of yet unconquered. The defenders are the aforementioned mages, possibly 22.
There are only 22 of us now.
Those cowards fled after tonight's attack.
Possibly 60 to begin with.
There are what, 60 of us?
Though the boat we see bringing them in seems to hold less than a dozen. Joining them is an unnumbered cluster of refugee peasant insurgents. They may or may not have military experience given the numbers of bows and arrows in their possession, but there is no sign of official army personnel from the Kingdom of Sodden. The invaders include Fringilla, her magical subordinates, a single trebuchet, and what we're given to understand is an advance party, some unknown number of soldiers with Cahir at the lead sent ahead of the main invasion force of 50,000 men. This main force will arrive at Sodden in 2 days.
The general's moving troops to the Yoruba Valley. They're 2 days away.
The goal of the defenders is to hold the castle for these 2 days, after which the northern kingdoms will hopefully arrive with reinforcements.
When is that?
Within 2 days. Hopefully.
That's the strategy. A military strategy.
Okay. We ready?
Oh man, you don't even know. It's about to go off.
Number 1. Why didn't they just blow up the bridge? See, if you have a relatively small number of heroes trying to defend themselves against a larger force, the best and most logical option is to force the enemy into a chokehold, make them pass into an area that negates their advantage in numbers. This was perhaps most famously the strategy deployed by the Spartans and Greeks at Thermopylae, which many people will unfortunately know best from the movie 300. A lesser-known but equally fun legend is that written in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, where at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, one of Harold Hardrada's axemen held the bridge alone against an oncoming 40-some Englishmen.
If we cut them off at the chokehold, we can still stop the Empire's progress.
And yet the castle where our mages take refuge and plan to stand against the coming siege is on the wrong side. Ideally, this would be a stronghold against an army invading from the north. Now, I'm not calling this a mistake. Just because the original builders envisioned this when the castle was first created doesn't mean that every battle it sees has to go this way. But this does mean that the defenders are at a disadvantage. They still have the sturdy door and walls of the outer courtyard to protect them from the attacking enemy, but the fortress was simply not primarily constructed to withstand an assault from the south. It is pressed upon us repeatedly that Sodden is the only place where the Nilfgaardian army can pass into the north.
There's only one way to move north, through Sodden Hill.
The Uruga River ravine that the Sodden Bridge stretches across is massive and would optimistically take days for an enemy to ford. So why don't they cross it, blow it up, and wait in the hills to the north for the reinforcements? We even see them making and using magical explosives. This is pointedly shown as a main factor of their defense strategy, and admittedly we never see these explosives break the castle's stone, but it doesn't mean that they couldn't, or that these 60 incredibly powerful mages couldn't concoct something that does. Worst case scenario, they've bought themselves a huge amount of time, in which the Nilfgaardians have to fell trees and construct repairs on the bridge, while our mages try to sabotage their efforts from afar. Best case scenario, they destroy enough of it that the Nilfgaardians are just stuck, trying to find another way around, and by the time they do, the Northern Kingdom's armies are there to meet them. Crossing the bridge and waiting in the landscape beyond would admittedly leave our heroes out in the open without much cover, but the castle isn't doing them much good anyway. It's Yennefer and the others who save them from the trebuchet attack. We don't really see the walls acting as an effective defense, and then the doors get busted open anyway. Now, even if our heroes fled to the northern banks of the Uruga, there could still be ways around this, magical portals for one, but as we've seen, portals take a lot of energy to create repeatedly, and it wouldn't be a sustainable way to move soldiers across the ravine in the long term. If it was, then they wouldn't even be trying to attack Sodden, they would be portaling people across some other section of the ravine. So this would leave us with basically no soldiers in play, in a purely magic-on-magic battle, where Fringilla and her sorceresses try to take down Tissaea's sorceresses from afar, and the heroes are on much more equal footing. They could even have included it in their plans as a desperate last resort, where they pledged to destroy the bridge if the battle seemed to be going badly, knowing that this would trap them all on the wrong side and that they were dooming themselves to self-sacrifice. This was the theme of the story of Horatius at the Bridge, one of the more moving and heroic stands in the Etruscan Wars of the early Roman Republic, where a young officer briefly stood alone against the approaching enemy while his own men destroyed the bridge behind him, ensuring their safe retreat while leaving him with no means of escape other than fording the river and swimming to shore. So yeah, just blow it up. I actually have a theory about what happened here. I have no idea whether or not it's true, but it gives the biggest benefit of the doubt to everyone involved, so here it is. The production designers who decided to put this bridge here, and the staff writers who came up with the defense plan at Sodden, just never talked to each other until it was too late. I'm completely serious, and it would explain why not a single character in the entire episode even references or says the word bridge. This is a great design for the site of a siege if you don't have any details of how that siege will play out, and the siege as it plays out makes not total sense, but certainly a lot more sense if the people writing it don't know anything about the lay of the land.
Somebody royally forked up. Somebody forked up. Why can't I say fork?
Speaking of the lay of the land, my second largest gripe with the Battle of Sodden Hill is this. For the entire battle, I have no clue where the hell anybody is or how many of them there are. When each of our witches attack the Nilfgaardians, they're killing about 1/10 of the army, 1/100th. It looks like Triss brings down a few dozen in the woods, and Coral takes down a few dozen more as they emerge into the clearing. Sabrina and her fizzy stones take down another few dozen. Is this making a dent, or is this like trying to empty a lake with a bucket? How big is this advance force? We do see troops marching through the night here, and again in morning light. Are these the same men? Have they been marching very slowly all night? Is this Cahir's army, or the main army of 50,000? Honestly, I think the best continuity we get is this shot later in the episode. Okay, so when Coral first kills these soldiers, she starts bleeding slightly from the nose, and then in this shot she's been bleeding heavily from both nostrils and also from her mouth. If she killed about 35 attackers here, I counted, then by the time we come to this scene she could have killed, 10 times as many? Let's ballpark that between 300 and 500 total. And if we pretended that each of the other 22 mages had a roughly equal kill count, optimistically those bodies could collectively number between 5,000 and 10,000. This wouldn't be a victory against a force of 50,000, but it would be a terrible blow against Cahir if he were, say, scouting ahead with a single legion. The problem is, this is all conjecture. As a side note, oh my god, where are your shields? You're going to besiege a castle and you have ugly wavy swords and are decked head to toe in incredibly ugly, very expensive armor. Expensive because it's black and it's all identical, and that wavy pattern indicates that a huge amount of metal was wasted in the design. But not a single one of you has a shield. The movie Troy isn't my go-to for portraying historical realism, but you know what it does show? People using their shields and the importance of those shields when fighting in unison. Seriously, why would you give your men wrinkly ballsack armor but not give them shields? Also, while I'm ranting about Nilfgaard, why did all of these professional soldiers just run into the fight willy-nilly? Like, I get that you're fighting magicians, not an enemy phalanx or whatever, but there are still archers on those walls. Where is your troop formation? In a war scene, there's importance in showing an accurate sense of scale, direction, and formation. This is how ancient armies, which were not always dressed uniformly in easily distinguishable opposing colors, avoided stabbing their own allies in the back. Infantry battles primarily revolved around holding a line and the attackers trying to break that line. Even a movie like Alexander, which was primarily a mess of wasted opportunities, has some fantastic examples of aerial troop formation shots. Anyway, back to the main question at hand. Where are the Nilfgaardians in relation to our defenders? Just, where are they coming from? And where are they going? I'm going to try to track everyone's locations from the start of the battle to the finish, and a fun game for everyone following along is this. Please try to figure out why the hell they are there. Right, so Fringilla knows that the mages are safest behind the castle walls.
Pull the mages out.
Vilgefortz plays directly into her hands and sends 10 out to fight,
10 of you, to the field, go!
while the villagers man the castle. And this is... okay. We have no view of the troops in relation to the castle, but we know that Yennefer can see them to the southwest-ish from her tower, which may indicate that they're passing through a clearing in the woods or just beginning to emerge from the tree line, apparently with every intent to hack at the stone walls with their swords. So okay, Triss is here and the troops are, here. But then Yennefer sees some more troops. And Coral is clearly right in front of them, outside of the castle's furthest defensive walls, and just standing alone in the field with nothing to protect her, which is why she later dies. Obviously. Sabrina and her archers are standing on the walls of the keep, using slingshots and arrows to hit the soldiers all the way over here, which, nice shot, peasant insurgents, damn. Cahir, I'm going to pronounce it differently every single time. Cahir sends his men curving around the northeast.
March!
Vilgefortz appears and does a frankly embarrassing job of trying to kill him, and Tissaia is just wandering the woods alone somewhere, looking for Fringilla to have a friendly chat with her, having taken 0 defensive measures.
That's the strategy.
You people are in a war. Why is nobody thinking a single step ahead? Fringilla busts the gates open so this guy can walk through. No idea why they didn't chuck the little worm box through a portal instead, but whatever. And at random intervals, the doors seem to just still be hanging open. Like, we see Triss defending them at one point, but then a minute later they're just empty, with dead defenders lying everywhere and dead soldiers outside and 0 soldiers spilling into the courtyard. And this is Coral and the others running back to the gate, right? Why were they so far from the walls? When did the soldiers get all around them? Who is this lying on the ground? Where the fuck are they?
I can't keep track of any of it anymore!
My favorite line here probably comes from Yennefer, who says,
You need to get to the front line.
I hate to break it to you, but that ship has sailed, wrecked, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Ow.
What front line? Where is it? Who is it? And then the next thing we know, it's nighttime. It's night. The sky is pitch black. And they're still fighting, running and fighting and killing the defenders of the keep. But who? Who is left? Where are these soldiers running in from? What's freaking taking them so long?
What's happening? What's happening?
Yennefer and Tissaia have only just found each other. Yennefer's mind is still on getting Sabrina help, but the gate has been hanging open. The courtyard is on fire. Girl, Sabrina should be dead. You should all be dead. It's been so long that the entire army should be a mile north of the bridge by now.
Could you excuse me? Ah!
And trust me, I get it. If you don't have the budget for your army to be more than a few dozen guys in the woods, that's cool. That's totally understandable. But the thing is, they didn't have to show this battle at all. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing fantasy armies clash just as much as the next girl, but in the original novel, Sodden Hill is not actually shown. It's described afterward like some Lovecraftian horror of a war scene that is too terrible to behold. And compared to that, what we're shown is like the barest hint of the essence of Sodden. It's like the LaCroix of Sodden. Anyway, one thing that people sometimes forget is that Game of Thrones didn't show many battles in the first few seasons. We see the precursor to and the aftermath of the Battle of Oxcross. Robb Stark looms large as a military commander, not because we get to see him personally wielding a sword, but due to what we hear about him.
And what do they say of Robb Stark in the north?
They call him the Young Wolf.
And?
They say he rides into battle on the back of a giant dire wolf. They say he can turn into a wolf himself when he wants. They say he can't be killed.
They even do this a little bit with Queen Calanthe in the show, and this would have been a totally valid and cost-effective, if slightly less exciting, way for the show to depict Sodden Hill, but instead they made the choice to show it from start to finish. And that's fine too, but there was supposed to be, lightning and shit. This episode did remind me somewhat of BBC's Merlin, which I think at its height had a budget of around $3 million per episode. Anyway, The Witcher reportedly had a budget of around $10 million per episode. And I know that they needed that budget for magical special effects, but remember, this is what $10 million per episode can look like on the battlefield. Want a smaller budget example? This scene is mostly hilarious, but Vikings had maybe a little more than half The Witcher's budget and still gives you a totally clear image of the size of your fighting force. And here The Last Kingdom, which had an even smaller budget than Vikings, not only shows you the size of its army and a clear battle line, but stresses the importance of that shield wall. And yeah, none of the leads are wearing helmets, but you can't win them all. A little embarrassingly, we can even compare Sodden Hill to the first battle we see in The Witcher, where Queen Calanthe leads Sintra against Nilfgaard. Now, don't get me wrong, there are problems with this battle too. This is a terrible battlefield for a cavalry charge. Our heroes on horseback seem to be using swords as their primary weapon. Fun side note, when trying to hit an opponent in the saddle, you want to start with a long pointy thing, not a short pointy thing. Even Braveheart basically got that part right. They wait too long to enter the field. The horses are spread out in a thin line across the front of heavy infantry, rather than grouped into any kind of tight formation, and the Nilfgaardians don't really seem to be in formation to withstand them either. Again, even in Braveheart, Wallace's men didn't just run toward the oncoming horses. For a slightly more sensible cavalry charge, check out the Battle of Sodden Hill in The Outlaw King. But here on the Cintran battlefield, you can at least clearly see both the enemy's numbers and where each army is in relation to the other. But maybe the best comparison I can make is the climactic naval siege at Blackwater Bay, which came at the end of Game of Thrones Season 2 and had a budget of $8 million. There are a lot of parallels that you can draw between these two sequences, but at the Blackwater you never lose track of where your heroes and antagonists are. You have a decent understanding of how numerous the attackers are, what their physical goal is, and what's stopping them from getting there. As those guarding the castle retreat, just like at Helm's Deep, it's clear enough how much ground they're losing, how the walls are keeping them safe, and what the chances are that they will survive until morning.
Let's hope they last the night.
The obvious argument against all of the examples that I'm giving here is that in The Witcher, there is no professional defending army. There's just a few dozen witches and, again, some peasant insurgents. But the show made that decision. They could have chosen to write a castle guard into this episode, but they didn't. And it's not as if the trope of a few desperate, inexpert defenders under siege, even a magical siege, is an unusual one.
You do realize, of course, we can't keep out you-know-who indefinitely.
That doesn't mean we can't delay him.
That was the plot of Helm's Deep, which may be the cause of these unfortunate comparisons, though in the Two Towers novel there were maybe 10 times as many Rohirrim in the field. There's the Blackwater and other famous military triumphs of our time. Yet to me, what Sodden Hill calls to mind more than anything else is an episode of Hercules' The Legendary Journeys, or maybe the far superior Xena Warrior Princess.
Xena has no apologies. Xena is a really cool show. I mean, I would use the word magnificent. There's a lot there to be had. The fact that she was an Attila the Hun. She's fighting for redemption, but she knows she doesn't deserve redemption. All right, she's paying a debt she can never pay, and she'll always be paying 10 cents on the dollar. I mean, that's just good shit.
It cost maybe $1 million per episode, depending on the season, and the show tragically went off the air in the year 2001. Objectively speaking, it did not have the production value or the budget to match what we see in The Witcher, but do you want to watch a single person hold off an onslaught of unknown numbers, or a city under siege where you're not quite sure where anybody is or how any of the secondary protagonists are still alive? Or a city under siege from a bunch of, random dudes with swords who get inexplicably scared off by the improvisations of a few townspeople? Or that same thing again. Or again. Yeah, Xena is your show, and these episodes aired 20 years before The Witcher.
Tell the truth, it's horrendous. It's horrendous.
Even if we look at the magic itself as it's used in this episode, the mages on both sides seem to fall woefully short of anything resembling not only a coherent military strategy, but just plain logic. We could start with this line.
I wish I could do that. It's magic. It's not real.
Which makes zero sense to me. Those feathers are real. They need them to make fletchings for arrows. Those arrows might later save everybody's lives. So the act of gifting those very real feathers is important and meaningful for you both. But that's just scratching the surface. Hey, maybe close the giant fucking doors before you magic some flimsy vines across them?
That's the strategy.
Maybe use those magical portals to better effect. They are a really clever way to breach any defense, but each side does it exactly once and never again. Which leads us to this.
We're mages, damn powerful ones.
Every single time we see one of these ladies take down the attacking troops, it takes visible effort. They're clearly exhausting themselves, and don't get me wrong, being able to slaughter dozens in a single gesture is powerful, but not powerful enough to use on an army of this size. Why are they acting like this plan is remotely sustainable? Why were Fringilla's mages killing themselves to make fireballs? If they want to show that magic has a cost, that's completely understandable, but why not attack with normal fireballs that use normal fire? Maybe those would be less effective, but we don't see these magical fireballs killing anyone anyway, so the point is completely moot. Forget cruel, it's just impractical. Fringilla, why are you killing your sorceresses? What, was it too hard to find a rock and some pitch and put a torch to it? There is literally a man standing right there with a flaming torch. As we see here in clips of Henry V from the 2019 film The King, or of Robert the Bruce in The Outlaw King, not only can you use regular fire with these very regular weapons of medieval war, but it's also occasionally helpful to have more than just one trebuchet. Like, seriously, I think Nilfgaard just had this one. Which... Why? Even the triumphant end scene where Yennefer evolves into full badass mode and unleashes her chaos, and potentially kills off all of their remaining allies, becomes less powerful when you start to wonder, does this mean she could have done it the entire time? Just destroyed the advance force single-handedly all at once before anyone died and let her less powerful compatriots pick off the stragglers? And maybe this is the point. Maybe they're meant to be bad at this. But even if you take that to be true and accept this intradiegetic justification that puts the blame for any failures in logic at the feet of the characters and not the real-life writers, producers, directors, whoever, it still doesn't resolve the myriad of other issues. Anyway, none of this matters because with nothing but a band of peasants to hold off an oncoming army of 50,000 people, they should have just blown up the bridge. Just blow up the bridge. And wash your hands. Stay home and wash your hands. Don't go anywhere. Don't do that. Two pronouns. It's Irish, and it's pronounced care.